Elizabeth Whited. I'm the Operations Coordinator here at the Rent Right Directory, and I also have my colleague Ryan Colley with me here.
Hello, my name is Ryan Colley. I'm the Director of Business Development here, guys.
Okay, so we do have the PowerPoint presentation. Just type in your questions. We'll do those at the end. It might not take a full 45 minutes, but we'll see what we can do. Hopefully you guys have some good questions. This presentation actually was taken from an article that I wrote. Our owners are property owners and property managers here I'm actually located here in Dallas, Texas, and they also have offices in Southern California and Los Angeles. And they were the ones that brought it to my attention that, human trafficking, a lot of times sex trafficking in Southern California is a really big issue, and labor trafficking here in Texas as well. Actually, Texas is pretty big for it, especially down in Houston for the large sporting events that happen and things like that. So I wanted to get a little more information, and I interviewed some police detectives and some folks in the area. So this is how we came up with this. So through talking to both Detective Reyes and Detective Clark, we really learned that uncovering human trafficking falls upon ordinary citizens. Police personnel and law enforcement officials are trained to be a bit more suspicious, and we kind of focused on the aspect of folks in real estate. A lot of times folks in the multifamily industry can really make a difference if they see something that doesn't quite seem right, and they let someone know and follow up with it just by asking the right types of questions, and also folks in watch groups that will really help them out. So they're in an excellent position to uncover it because of their status and what they see on a day-to-day basis. So just a couple of statistics. Approximately 700,000 to 2 million people are trafficked around the globe every year for labor and sex trafficking. Obviously, the number will range because it's very hard to pinpoint trafficking cases from a distance. It's not necessarily illegal to be with a human being or have more than, a couple people living in an apartment complex per se, but there are other things that you can watch out for to see kind of what's going on if you really take a closer look. And this photo on the PowerPoint, it was actually taken from a class at SUNY, the Levin Institute, and it's actually from 2011, but what you can see are the warmer colors are actually the countries of origin where the humans are coming from, and then the cooler colors will indicate the countries of destination. Okay, some red flags that may not be so, might not be something that you think of offhand. Crime Watch meetings and groups present the perfect opportunity to educate the general public and employees on the red flags to look for. So obviously in the multifamily world, and when I say that, I'm usually speaking of residential apartment complexes, things like that, that are not gated, so they have easy access. This is where we see a lot of this type of thing. Not to say that it doesn't happen commercially, because it will happen in hotels and even commercial areas, Walmarts, things like that. But this is really kind of where a lot of this stuff happens. So getting to know residents, neighbors, if you're actually an employee of a multifamily complex, performing routine maintenance checks, which is something that should be done anyways, but that can kind of get you a little bit closer to finding out exactly what's going on. If you see an odd amount of people living in a unit at any given time, especially here in Texas, in an apartment complex, in every unit, everybody needs to be accounted for. Everybody needs to be on the lease if they're paying, if they are over 18. So that's something to keep in mind. Are there locks to keep people inside? They've actually seen that before. So if someone's not in control of where they go at any time, that could be an indication. Are the residents or are your neighbors discouraged from driving themselves places? A lot of times we'll see that folks are actually bussed in and out at certain times during the day, early in the morning, late at night. Everyone goes together. They don't have a car. They're not allowed to drive themselves anywhere. Are the residents or neighbors in possession of their own documents? especially at the time of applying to live in an apartment community, does someone always have to speak for them? Do they feel comfortable enough talking to somebody? Or if you engage in a conversation with them, are they allowed to talk to you? Or does someone come over and kind of, interfere, stop what's happening at any given point in the conversation? And then obviously, you would know if something was wrong if you saw signs of abuse, malnourishment, or fearfulness from anybody that could be a victim. So when we interviewed Bill Bernstein from Mosaic Family Services, they focus on refugee services and especially on human trafficking cases. He said, honestly, most of the time it was because someone did not have a good feeling about a situation they had witnessed and they sought help. So that means working with law enforcement. They have a hotline. There are quite a few hotlines and resources to use. And then they followed up. They made sure that something was done, because they see it and they're kind of in the community. They're always around and available. They offered a really unique way. I thought it was great. A series of graphics that was created. They partnered with a local artist named Jacob Haynes, and they had a series of illustrations that kind of portrayed something that could be happening in a trafficking case, whether it be sex trafficking or labor trafficking, just in case, they don't speak English or they don't speak the same language, because that can happen a lot. They wanted to provide a phone number so they would be able to get help if they needed to. And I have some examples on these pages here. They are in English at the bottom, but they had different languages as well.
What happened?
So you can see kind of different scenarios that could be happening. The detective from Box Springs that we interviewed actually saw it all the time, and he gave us a real life example that really kind of made us think about things differently. And it happened to be about labor trafficking. And he said, if you go to any large, maybe Chinese buffet restaurant, not to say obviously that this happens in all of them, but he had one in particular that we actually knew of. And he said, I've been in there before and I've tried to make contact with whoever's serving me. They don't speak a whole lot of English, but I've just been interested and talked to them about where they're from, what kind of accent they have. And he said, you could tell something was wrong when there was a woman kind of watching the restaurant, and she had to come up immediately and stop the conversation. And then, that was the end of our interaction. I never got to see that server again. They went in the back. So just by asking questions and being friendly, that's really all he was trying to do. And he said, that's how I kind of knew something was going on there. Something's not quite right in that particular instance. And so that kind of hit home, thinking about how it really happens around all of us. We just have to, know the right questions to ask, and just, honestly, he was just being friendly. He just wanted to kind of meet them and get to know a little bit more about them. I don't know if anybody's seen this. This is kind of a recent thing that's been on. I saw it on social media, LinkedIn and Twitter, but it's actually a new type of technology that they can display ads in public, in cities and public places. And they use a certain type of technology that changes the ad depending on the eye level of the viewer. So if someone is, I believe, if they are above 5'4", they are considered adult, just taken from national averages. And it actually displays two different messages. So a child's view in the lower view will actually show a bruised and beaten child. And this is the actual ad, I believe, was for abuse, but I think it could work either way. So that just in case a child is with their aggressor, their trafficker, they get a different perspective. So the technology is called a lenticular top layer, and it'll show a different image from the different varying angles. If an adult looks at the image, they'll see a sad child, and the message will say, sometimes child abuse is only visible to the child suffering it, but when a child looks at the ad, they'll see the bruises, and a direct message that says, if someone is hurting you, please phone us and we'll help you, and then gives the foundation's number. So even if they can't read, they will see the number on there, and they'll know that they can kind of empower themselves to take action. Another thing to keep in mind that I didn't necessarily think about right away. Oftentimes, trafficking victims wouldn't even consider themselves victims. You know, if they're coming over for labor trafficking, they might think that they actually owe that to somebody and that that's illegal. You know, that's something that their traffickers are allowed to do to them. They also will, potentially fear for the safety of themselves or their families. So it may not be something that if you try to take it into your own hands, you would get a direct answer from. You know, if you were to say, does this person do this to you? They may not be as forthcoming. That's why we would always recommend to contact local law enforcement. But, some tips that Detective Manny Reyes from the Fort Worth Police Department, he specializes in sex trafficking in the area and the county. So he said some clear indications, especially if there's multifamily complexes, if they don't have gates, so if they're easy to access. And there's a lot of traffic coming in, probably a lot of men coming in. A shorter stay of 60 to 90 seconds is probably an indication of a drug deal, something a little bit faster. And he said a longer stay, maybe 15 to 45, could potentially be sex trafficking if there's a lot at night. And that's something, as a neighbor, you would, absolutely notice something like that. And to at least let someone know in the area, if not law enforcement, a property manager, something like that would be helpful. And, Detective Reyes also told us, I'm sure you've heard of Backpage.com. That's probably the number one. It's not even Craigslist anymore, but that's the number one site that the traffickers use to advertise in the adult section. That's where a lot of their business will come from. So a couple ways to become proactive, and why this kind of has to do with me working for a real estate company. We provide a free database to police officers and also to real estate professionals to just kind of stay in communication. And our owners actually run a nonprofit foundation, and they put teachers into apartment complexes to tutor children. But, they will run background checks on everyone living in their unit. And they actually found that a woman came in to rent an apartment complex, and she signed the lease. She had great credit, very sweet and unassuming, but she never actually moved in, and instead her son moved in, who was a registered sex offender living with children. So they kicked him out, but they had no way to kind of keep track of this woman who had signed for him. This happens with drug dealers. This happens with sex traffickers. They get someone who has great credit and they'll pay them in cash. So it can really happen in even upscale, nice neighborhoods. It can happen really anywhere. And that kind of opened their eyes to say we need a good level of communication. And they wanted to work with the police departments on this. So we kind of keep that constant channel of communication with them. We have the database to share information about proxy renters, and that's what we would call the people that rent for criminals, sex traffickers, and the like, drug dealers. So they're technically those with qualifying credit who rent on behalf of those unauthorized tenants, and they never actually live in the unit. So you can tell if, a woman were to rent an apartment complex and you never see her, you only see a male, there's probably something going on, or multiple people living there that shouldn't be on the lease. We also, the incident reporting database, as we call it, the free portion keeps track of property damage, property crime, evictions, skips, lease violations, things like that. And actually, the federal government does view what we have as a credit reporting agency. So we do follow and strictly adhere to Fair Credit Reporting Act guidelines within that. Ryan typically actually attends the Crime Watch meetings, so we'll work within the communities and with the police department, and we'll tell them a little bit about what we do, how it could help them. It's, it is a free option, so if they want to give it a try, the better it is. The police officers are able to sign up. It takes about 5 minutes, and they can send out neighborhood email alerts for free to any community that they choose and any county that they would like. So it's built for the real estate industry, but it's also built for police officers. Anyone can sign up as long as they're approved. It's free for them, and then they can also include tenant screening if they want to at a minimal cost. And there's our information at the end. Do we have any questions?
Anybody have any questions?